Okay, so I'm starting the recording. Okay, great. It's recording. So Anand, you're going to share your screen first?
Yeah. Give me 1 second. Good stuff. So cool. So if you folks are ready, then I can get started here, shall I?
Okay.
Perfect. So the category that we've applied for is the best foundational mathematics instructional solution. We're particularly going to be showcasing a product that we've built in partnership with a Ministry of Education, and I'll take you through this. But just before I get into the product details, I want to start with a quotation from the Secretary General of the OECD, or the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, where he laid that, this quotation that I'm showing you here laid the foundation for the development of this product in partnership with the ministry called MathemaTIC. And the idea here is, being multilingual in a globalized world is undeniably considered a tremendous asset for employability. And in fact, truly, within the European community out there, now we're in Canada, this entire project was done in collaboration with ministries in Europe. It was also, the languages vary so much country to country that truly it's also considered a drawback if a job seeker can only speak one language. Now, the focus here is this pretty little country called Luxembourg. I'm not sure if you've got the chance to visit this country, but it's the tiny country sandwiched between Belgium, Germany, and France. And we've been working with them for about 5 to 6 years now. There's a big challenge that the country has been facing for many, many years. Now, this country is a country that has the highest proportion of students who don't speak the language of instruction at home. And in the community itself, more than anything, they have the highest number of hours dedicated to teaching foreign languages in the country, in the education system. And if you look at the ethnic composition of Luxembourg, you notice that just a little over 50% are truly Luxembourgers, but otherwise, most of them are immigrants or working people who come in and out of the country from neighboring countries. Quite a diverse population. In addition to this, in the education system in Luxembourg, the language of instruction through primary school is German, and that switches over completely to French, especially for mathematics. Now, these are students coming in from all these different countries, not able to speak the local language of instruction, that's Luxembourgish, and learning in a different language through primary and switching to a different language in secondary. A pretty massive challenge that the country's been facing for many, many years. Now, because of this massive immigration into Luxembourg, given its location and its overall, its overall attractiveness within Europe, Luxembourg, their main language of communication is Luxembourgish, but then 2/3 of students enrolling in preschools don't speak the language. Pretty sizable number. And when you look at mathematics specifically, just a fraction, 1 out of 5 students don't achieve those minimum standards of mathematics at the elementary school level. And through the surveys and the analysis and the statistics that they've identified, that these students are mainly those that struggle with the language in the elementary school level. And then when they move on to the secondary school level, a massive chunk of them, we're talking about 3 out of 5 students, don't achieve those minimum standards for mathematics. So a challenge that existed for years and years in Luxembourg. In 2014, the government of Luxembourg put together a plan called the Digital Luxembourg Plan. This was an initiative within the framework of the EU Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program, The objective here was to promote digital awareness among the citizens of Luxembourg. Coming straight to the Ministry of Education in Luxembourg, they developed a digital for education strategy that has 4 pillars to make every single student and learner within the country digital citizens, to make the country a smarter nation. Now, MathemaTIC, our project, sat right here to make students digital learners with a focus on mathematics. But the key objective here was to identify ways in which they could neutralize that language barrier so they could help students raise that level of attainment in mathematics. Now, we looked at the Codie Award submission criteria, and we pulled out the various criteria related to this particular category, and we've got that right on top. And as we progress through these slides to make it just a little easier for you, we've identified those slides that cover those specific criteria. And then through the demo, Jacob will take you through these different aspects also. So 2015, we looked to see how could we collaborate with the Ministry of Education to work towards resolving this big challenge that they had, specifically in primary and secondary schools. We looked to see how could we provide them with a solution that would create a situation where students will have a personalized learning environment through an assessment for learning principle and an assessment of learning principle. Formative and summative resources that students could use throughout the school year in a real world setting, but using digitally rich media to enable this learning experience. The primary objective for MathemaTIC was to provide students with a personalized environment that would provide them with interactive simulations, games, diagnostic summative assessments that would connect the abstract concepts in mathematics to their real world applications. They wanted to make sure that their students get that aha moment as they were working through this entire resource. It was so critical for them. It had to be a language neutral solution, a solution that would provide students with the ability to switch easily between 4 languages and dynamically too. So that way, it literally to the point, it should not refresh their screen. It should dynamically switch even when a voice is playing or an interaction is taking place. So we built a system for that to happen and switch between French, English, German, and Portuguese. And another key goal was to ensure that it provides teachers with that insight or those tools to get understandable data so that they could make use and support their students throughout the school year and tailor their teaching styles as required based on their own teaching styles. 2015 marked that year when we partnered with the Ministry of Education in Luxembourg in collaboration with educators and policymakers from the Ministry of Education in France, in Portugal, and a wide variety of universities also participated, but the key university was the University of Luxembourg, the Luxembourg Institute of Socioeconomic Research, the Luxembourg Center for Educational Testing, for Science and Technology, and the Data Center, because we were working with a lot of sensitive data over here, student data from primary and secondary schools. So there were integrations into the existing student information management system over there. The overall platform was built. Making strong reference to Bechter's quality principles for digital learning resources, which included core pedagogical principles. And the key aspect here was access for every student across the country, making sure that students were engaged through the process, providing them with an assessment to support learning. That was key. And a whole lot of different innovative approaches using human-computer interaction. Now, we had support from the research team at the University of Luxembourg to make this whole thing happen. And core design principles were implemented throughout the whole development. The development took us 5 years, and the focus was grades 3 up to grade 10. Another key aspect was because we had these other ministries at different countries participating in this project, it had to be interoperable. Every assessment item we built had to comply with the portable custom interaction standards as laid out by IMS, so they could be used in other countries on their own platforms or on the MathemaTIC platform itself. We also, in this project, we also partnered with Cambridge Mathematics, a division under Cambridge University. Now, Cambridge Mathematics focuses on identifying those key underlying skills through a mapping system. So through that partnership, we mapped out the entire product to provide students, to provide teachers with the ability to assign specific modules for students throughout the school year and customize that teaching experience. So that way, students would get that, that depth of learning down to that skill that they were missing as they work through these. So these are waypoints. And by the way, we'll be sharing this presentation deck also with you for your reference. We developed assessment items and modules for grades 3, 4, grades 5 and 6, grades 7 and 8, and then everything that we built over the first 3.5 to 4 years for those grades were expanded and extended for grades 9 and 10. That covered the entire learning and assessment material. So we're talking about formative and summative learning over here. Now, every grade had organized modules within it. Each of these modules were connected to maps where students could work their way through these different maps based on whatever their performance was on the diagnostic assessment, which they would start working through, and it would direct them to work on these different maps. Students had the ability to learn, practice, and apply. And in that process of going through the system, they would collect stars, and that would be tracked by students and by teachers. Here's a typical learning module that we built. Now, this is all voice enabled. Once again, if you look at this, the objective here is, although it's teaching them a concept, it had to be made practical. And that was critical through that learning, because in these learning modules, the objective was to conceptualize every single topic through the whole process. And once students complete that conceptual understanding, they would practice what they've learned. Now, the practice modules provided them with, or made mathematics tangible through the entire learning process. They have a wide variety of tools that they could work with while they were working on these practice items. And then finally, when they complete the learning and practice items, they were presented with application-based items. And this is critical because this is where it connects to that real world, where they're working their way through this and answering questions. Now, the interesting part about every application problem that you will go through when you're going through the system, you will notice that students have the option to either say, for example, estimate, in this case, the area of the lake by drawing, using the ruler, drawing lines, calculating it and multiplying it out, or using these counters and calculating the number of boxes and estimating the area. The nice thing is teachers would get to see this data and then understand their students even better. They would know whether a student used multiplication, addition, what sort of estimation in this particular problem, and provide them with that additional support. Every module has diagnostic and summative assessments to gauge that learner gains throughout the entire formative learning experience in the school year, and assigned at different times throughout the school year for students. There were core concepts that we had to take and develop or gamify them throughout the process to make them much more engaging for students. In that process, we also conduct nationwide games and game competitions for all schools across the country. Now, it's Luxembourg, it's a smaller country, but every single school across the country participates and they get awards through the whole process. There's a lot of information about this on our social media and on the MathemaTIC website social media. Teachers had the ability to monitor the progress and performance of their students through the diagnostic, through each of these different formative assessment modules that they work through, and they can download, print PDFs, distributed to their, provided to their parents, or have discussion with the primary school parents, and students and parents also had access to their own reports that they could get to view. Meanwhile, through the activity modules, teachers can get to see how much time each student has spent on every single assessment as students work their way through it based on what has been assigned to them. So the black ones that you see here when you go on the system are the ones that are the challenge items, or mainly the ones that are final ones, or the conceptual, the real world applications, the application-based items. There are leaderboards that are used for the national assessment that's run right across the country, and also in class if a teacher wishes to run these various games in collaboration with all the other students. Throughout the assessment, a wide variety of feedback types were developed, and we've built about something like about 1,000 to 1,500 technology-enhanced assessment items in the process over the past 5 years, and thousands of diagnostic and summative assessments have been built. We use numerous tool types in the entire development. All of this was built end-to-end, custom developed by us over here in Toronto. And a wide variety of response types students could use to provide response and receive feedback as they were working their way through these items. Now, educators and administrators in the country have the ability to go into the authoring platform and create their own assessments and assign diagnostic and summative assessments to their students as required, but they would pick and choose formative ones that have already been built through the entire project. So that provides you with just a quick snapshot of the entire product and its development. At this point, I'm going to pass it on to Jacob. And Jacob, once you finish off, you can pass it back to me because I've got a few more slides to take them through on the application side.
Great, thanks. So Anand, you finished sharing your screen there. I'm going to share it here. Thank you very much for that context of the system and the development of the platform. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen now. Just want to confirm you guys can all see the screen here.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, so we're going to start with a short demo. We're going to go over a lot of the points that Anand just went over. A few other things I'm going to show you guys here. The first thing I'll point out is, as you'll see, this is a live website where both students and teachers are going into access the site where they're going to connect to log in. This isn't an external software they need to download. They can access this from home in the classroom. It's built to be very flexible that way and used on a number of devices. So I'm just going to go ahead and log into my test account that I've set up. So I'm going to show you guys both the teacher side of this and the student side, but we're going to start by logging in as a teacher. Let me just grab my account here. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so the first thing you'll see here when a teacher logs in, they'll be able to see all their classes that they currently have set up and the ability to create new classes. I've created a few classes here which go over some of the our typical groupings of the different items that we've looked at for different grade levels, and we're going to go into each one. But if I was a teacher at any time could also create new classes for and take in specific groupings of items that have been preset by their school or their Ministry of Education, and create classes with them. And then they could also enter the name of that new class if they wanted to. And they would, in order to register students, each class has a code that they would provide to their students to log in. But first, let's just hop into a lesson here, into a class here. So the first thing we're going to do is just going to give a brief overview of everything we're seeing, all the components of the site. When a teacher logs in, they'll have access to a few key panels here, or tabs on the left. This includes their dashboard. And again, we're going to go into each of these in a bit more detail, but they have their dashboard, their agenda feature, their activity logs, their module selection, the leaderboards for any competitions that are running. So we'd have none running on this one right now, and access to any documents that have been set up for the different modules. So the first thing that we're going to look at here are those different modules that Anand spoke about and how they're set up. And just like he said, they're grouped here based on an alignment to the standards that were given by the ministry in Luxembourg, but they can be changed and customized depending on what school or organization is using them. So these are just the different types of the layout that we have for this particular group. I believe this is for cycle 4, which would be around the grade 3-4 level. So for example, if I go into an individual topic, it'll then open up my map. And I'm seeing this as a teacher right now, and we'll see what a student sees, but it is very similar to what I'm seeing, where they have a map that they need to progress through. Like Anand said, there are different item types within the map. These go from the diagnostics, which all students do to start the different maps, to the learning lessons, the learning items, the practice items, and the applying items, as well as a summative. So just to give you an example of how this can change for different grade levels, or how it might change for a different organization or a different school. If we go into a grade maybe that's a bit younger, so cycle 3, which would be grade 3, we can see that the layout's a little bit different here, but it still is grouping them by different concepts. So if I go into my space, shapes, and measurements, I'll see that I still have a map here. It's a little more simplified for the younger grades, but it still follows the same idea where students go through a map to complete different item types and collect stars. I will go into a few items in a moment. So the cohesiveness of these maps allows students to work through this. They can decide how they want to go about completing these items. So if once they unlock the diagnostic, they can decide to go on different routes, but it still is all built on progression. So no matter what route they choose, they can decide, okay, I want to do all my initial learning items first to learn about different concepts and then go to apply, or I can follow one path all the way down to completion. And I can do that one, this one lane that focuses on maybe multiplication, or something that focuses on something different. So it does give them that ability to choose. So the first thing we're going to look at is a diagnostic. So I like doing fractions because I find that a lot of students have problems with fractions, or it's an area where we see that we have a lot of content for them over multiple grade levels. So I want to start there. So I'm going to go ahead and open the fractions here. I just want to make sure you're going to be able to hear my sound. Let me just check quickly. Okay. Okay, so I'm just viewing this as a teacher, but it is very similar to what a student will see. Okay, so as Anand was saying, the diagnostics are meant to gauge the student's level. It gives teachers and administrators an understanding of where they're at with their skills on a particular subject. So these will be these diagnostic assessments will ask a range of questions and levels of difficulty for this one topic. So they're pretty straightforward here. It's not going to give me any feedback or corrections yet. It's just a diagnostic. And I'm not doing this discerningly, so if I get it wrong. But you see there's different types of, different question types, different ways that I can interact with it. Even here, just as I'm doing the assessment, I do have access to a few tools, not as many as I would have in some other items, but we'll look at those in more in depth later. So I can use my number pad to interact with it, but I can also use the pad here. And it also shows some different item types that I would have access to. Even though that's not correct, I know. There you go. Okay, and it continues to the whole diagnostic. I'm not going to go through the whole thing here, so we have time to look at other stuff. But the thing to note with those diagnostics is what they're doing is it's for students, it's unlocking all the other pathways. So depending on how a teacher assigns this to a student, they are basically blocking them from continuing until they get that initial diagnostic. And that is a choice for the teacher, and we'll see how they can design that or decide to do that. So the next thing I want to look at is one of the applying items, or one of the applying items here. Sorry, one of the learning items here. And like Anand was saying, the learning items will take a concept and teach it to students in a very fundamental way. So they'll take those key concepts and show it to them. So if I go to this one here, actually, I'll just change it up a bit. Let's go to a higher grade level. Okay, so here is our module map, or different category, or different here's our fraction module map for students at the higher levels. So these could be used for grades 7, 8, 9, and 10. So if we look at one of these introductions to fractions, let's open up one of these lessons. Sorry guys, give me 1 second there. Sorry, were you guys able to?
There's just a big echo, Jake.
Sorry?
There's an echo.
Yeah, just let me know if you guys are able to hear this when I start it over.
I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you guys didn't hear that, I'm guessing.
Now I hear. No, but
Oh, now you hear me, but we didn't hear that less there. Let me just confirm. So I'm just going to quickly unshare my screen. I'll share it again, make sure that I have that set up. Okay, can you guys see my screen there?
Yeah.
yes.
We're going to be looking at different representations of fractions. This square is divided into 4 equal pieces. Color the indicated proportion of the surface. Click on the shapes to color. Fractions are composed of a numerator and a denominator. We can think of a fraction as a part of a whole, where the denominator represents how many total equal pieces the whole is divided into, and the numerator represents how many of the equal pieces we have. Now, let's represent some fractions. Color the indicated proportion of the surface. First, determine the number of pieces you need. Color the indicated proportion of the surface. Click on the shapes to color. Color the indicated proportion of the surface. First, determine the number of pieces you need.
So, sorry. So this is example of one of the lessons that the students are going through, where they're learning the concepts here, and it takes them through it and breaks it down so they have to engage with each item type. They wouldn't be able to just continue without completing it. They do have to sit through it and go through the lesson. So these aren't static videos that students just sit through and can, have a snack while it's going through. They do have to engage with it and complete it for them to go through. There is the ability for them to get help, and these different feedback types are designed based on the question. And they'll have to enter something if they want to move forward. So this is an example of what students would do when they first start to learn an item. In terms of what they get to do once they've sort of got those fundamental skills under their belt, then they'll be able to practice it and hone those skills. I'm just going to pop back into my modules here.
Can you show us what it does when they get an answer wrong?
Oh yeah, sure. So I can do that in just while I'm going into a different item here. I'll go into one of the practice items, which just gives the students another chance to go through that item, but in a more detailed environment. Just going to switch my sound over again. So here students are going through a similar phase here, but they're going to engage with these different applying items where they get to go in and actually interact with the different questions. So you see here specifically for this tool, we are giving them the option to use the same sort of tools that they had in the learning items, where they can drag those and use them to understand how to complete the question here. So if I were to get a question wrong, let's say, it would tell them to try again. And it also, so here I didn't use a grid. So it will tell them that they do have tools available to them that they might not have known. They can also, get that little help there to remind them of what they're looking for. And again, these will vary, and the different tools that have will vary depending on what they have access to, what question they're on. So for this one, if I took this, the other thing I want to show quickly here, just give it a second there. They do have access to a few more tools to complete these, as we were showing before. So if they didn't want to use the grid, they could draw it themselves. Oops. Oh, still a little dragging behind there. And you guys will get access to this to try it out for yourselves. Okay. The next portion here, what I want to show you are some of the different application items that students have access to, where they get to go and apply it to more real life scenarios that they have. So let me just quickly jump into another fractions item here. So all these, the black items here allow students to go and apply it, but in a more authentic and contextualized way. So these are often gamified approaches to practice and apply the skills that they've both learned and applied. So for example, this game is called Hop and Crunch. And it's also made to be more engaging for students because they're able to collect stars as they go through it. And depending on what difficulty they select, they'll be able to unlock more stars. For example, if I just select star 1 and I go to start this game. First, they'll give me my little tutorial as the student and what I'm supposed to do in this game. So I'm looking for my, my common numbers here. I can always go back to my instructions, but you see I'm only able to earn 1 star as I proceed through this, and it's a bit easier for me as I go through. So again, this is a game where they have to apply what they've learned throughout to get the rabbit to the carrot. If they can't get it, then they start getting strikes, and they'll eventually get 3 strikes and have to start over. So this is gamified to allow them to make them more excited about going through it and about beating the level. So for example, if I go to start here and I go to something a bit more difficult. See, now it's a bit more complicated, but I do have the option, the ability to gain more stars and fully complete it. For example, let me see here. No, can't go that way. No. Oh, got all my strikes. So I would need to restart to go get those stars. So I want to show another application item here too. I'm just going to go to a different subject now. So let's look at, I think one of our newest ones is algebra. Which one did I want to see? Was it algebra? Yeah. So the computer lab here. Is a great application item where students
Jacob,
yeah.
Jacob, can we also see the switching between languages?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
To find the result of a calculation program given an initial number, go through the calculation steps one at a time, using the result from the previous step each time. The last line shows the result of the calculation program when the initial number is 7.
I'm just going to get through the tutorial first. But as I switched to French there, as we were going through it, the language here switches with me. My whole page switches there to French. Give a moment there. So if I just take a look at one of the other
Tu peux
tabs.
suivre les mêmes étapes pour trouver le même résultat si tu commences avec une variable. Dans la dernière ligne se trouve le résultat.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to switch back to English now, but it does give me all the different options that I have there. And it does update in real time. So the next thing I want to do is just briefly look at some of the other features that teachers have access to and what they can do to customize the experience for their students. The agenda tab allows teachers to, from all those modules and everything that we just saw there, it allows teachers to go in and design custom resources for their students on certain times. So for example, I could, as a teacher, decide I want to do a lesson on fractions, and I could just go right and continue and just use that entire map that we just saw for fractions and assign them to students for a specific time. Or I can customize it to, my specific classroom or learning outcomes, and decide I want to go in and only choose exactly what I want to see and which of those dots I want to allow students to access. So right now, this is the fractions module. I can change anything there. I can change the title, how I want it to be called. I can decide what I actually want to keep in there. So for example, I could select fractions, and then all my fraction items will be listed, everything to include. So if there's one section that I don't want to include for this specific setup, for example, I don't want to look at equivalent fractions for whatever reason, I can decide not to include it. And then those won't be highlighted, and they'll be locked for students, so they won't be able to access it. And from this view, a teacher can also easily look quickly at the item to see what it is without having to go in it. So they can design exactly what they're going to do for that lesson. They can also insert a custom activity. So if they have a URL to a YouTube lesson or any other item that they want to show, they can actually add that directly into their lesson. So if whether this is a link to a PDF or something else they want to include along with these resources, they can do that. And even if they don't want this just limited to fractions, they can also add other parts to it. They could make this lesson completely so fractions and statistics. I don't know how you would do that, but you could. Or you could just go into the individual lessons and pick individual points that you want to add. So now let's say I want to save this agenda that I've created. So I've saved this new custom lesson for my students. I have it here. I'm going to go ahead and continue, and I can assign it to a date. So I can assign the date that it opens, where students are going to go in and access it when it closes. So how long they have to complete it. So I'm just going to set it for right now, 1 week. I can see right now I just put in one student for this particular class you have access to. But you could also design it just for key students if you wanted to do a custom resource just for one student or a group of students to give them more practice or more work. You could do that. You could see the students or the entire class.
What does force reattempt do? The checkbox in that lower left in the previous.
Yeah, that's for the that is for them to do the assessments. Yeah, the summative and the diagnostic and summative. So that's usually checked on, so that they have to do the diagnostic assessment before they get to the other ones. But if you turn that off, and let's say you just want to open a module for students just to go through any lesson and do whatever they want, you could do that without forcing the attempt. Okay. So now I'm going to just quickly log in as a student rather. I can't hear, so I'm just going to exit that quickly. And I can go into my class. I assign this student to all 3 classes. And the view as a student, they'll see all the modules that they have access to, but they'll also see their agenda view and specifically what they need to complete in order to complete the agenda that was assigned by the teacher. So I have all the fractions that I need to go through and that one integer lesson that I added. So if I go and I just want to do my first diagnostic, I'm just going to put some data in here just so we can see what it looks like on the teacher's end. Again, this is not, none of this is right. Multiple choice here. guess I'm just gonna continue through this quickly. Okay, so I've done a few now. So I'm going to back out of this. Just as a student, I've done a little bit of work in there. So then I'm gonna log out as a student and just quickly log in as a teacher so you guys can see some of the, back as the same teacher. So you can see some of the reporting that's available to teachers as they go through. Okay, so when I go in now, this is the dashboard that I have access to. Right now I only have one student who's assigned to this dashboard, but as students start completing different modules, you'll start seeing completion there. So I didn't do enough in the fraction for it to show up, but what I can do if I want to see specifically how long students were working on something, I can click in to any one of those places where a student did work, and I can see specifically that this student has accessed it for however amount of time. So I'm on student B right now. I can see if I go back to my dashboard, I have access to different reporting. So this is just for student B that I have selected here, where I can go ahead and download the assessments once they've completed them. But I'm also able to download a full learning report for that student. I'm just going to show it to you here. This guy downloaded it. Again, there's not much data here, but it does give me something that I can print out and see how they've done on each section.
So what would we normally see in these circles?
Yeah, so it would, here, I can show you actually what I'll do, just bear with me. I have another account that has a bit more data in it. So for example, you would be able to see, because this student did complete their diagnostic test. Download that. This one here, sorry. So as they complete it, they would see what percent they've completed here. And they would see that as they've completed, this is the learning, this is the diagnostic, and this is the post-assessment, the summative.
Ah, okay, thank you.
And then for the individual report for that student on that actual diagnostic they took, just a bit smaller, they'll be able to see how they did overall on the key concepts. This is for the individual assessment they did. And they can see a specific breakdown on how they did on each question. The expected response, the student's response, whether they got it right or wrong. So this is what's available on an individual level for each type of assessment that they do. And this is what's available on a class level, or on an overall level rather, for the one student.
I see.
Okay. And again, we're going to share access to both of you with a teacher account and a student account, so you can go in and try these out for yourself, to go in and play around with the lessons, and also see how the student would interact with different lessons and how the feedback is tracked. So we will be sending those along with the recordings. Okay.
Okay.
Great. So I think we're closing in on an hour here, so I better turn it back to Anand. Sorry, are you there, Anand?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. So
Okay.
Jacob, you can stop sharing. Yeah. So that's a typical view of how I would say pre-COVID students used to use this in class. They would work their way through the assessments, and it works on a wide variety of devices. We've developed this to be compatible or optimized for laptops, desktops, iPhones, and iPads and Androids, because of the sort of like the real estate that's required for them to work through these interactive items. It's not the most suitable for a phone, although there is an app available for the phone, but then teachers are encouraged to use this on their iPads or Androids or their desktops or laptops. Uh, the entire platform is being developed to be compatible or aligned in the compliance standards requirements from IMS Global, so that it could be portable, it could be interoperable and used on other platforms. It's also been extended. In 2016, we started extending this to schools in France for all primary schools across from K to 6. So that's another development project that's an extension of this for the platform to work in an offline environment to make sure that there's accessibility for every student across the country. It's also used for large-scale assessments. In France, for their secondary school students, about 800,000 students use this for their secondary school. In collaboration with Cambridge University, specifically the Cambridge Assessment International Education, right now we're expanding this to all Cambridge schools across the 160 countries. A pilot's currently in progress with 7 countries, and this has been going on. But because of COVID, we had a small break in between, but it's continuing on right now at this point. This platform has received recognition from the Brandon Hall Group from the E-Assessment Award for the best use of formative assessment, for raising attainment, reducing the numeracy gap, and for developing essential numeracy skills, mathematics skills, and also from the International Games competition in France. But primarily the impact of this has been towards working towards neutralizing the language barrier in these different countries in Europe, attaining mathematics, raising the attainment in mathematics, providing deeper insight to student skills for teachers, reducing that equity gap by making it available for every student across the country, and the most important is to improve that confidence and engagement in mathematics and to bridge that numeracy gap. And of course, in that whole process to transform the learning experience. I'm sorry, we don't have too much time left at the end here, but yeah, we had quite a lot of material to cover.
I thought it was an excellent presentation. I only have a few questions.
Yes.
For me, I'd like to know, I see where you start 3rd, 4th grade level.
Yeah.
And for students that are maybe missing some key concepts, is there the ability to train up to where they need to be on 3rd grade? How much further down does the program go?
Yeah, so when we started developing it, we started with 5 and 6, and then we worked down and up from 5 and 6. So the aim was to go right down to 3 and up to 10, and that's how the whole program was built. Now below 3 is what we're doing in France, where we're going from 3 to kindergarten, but there's been quite a lot of I'd say pushback from parents, because parents are sort of uncomfortable providing technology solutions at that age. So we've developed it. It's been introduced in France right now, and kindergarten to grade 2. We're talking about kids who are like 6 years old, 7 years old. They're just being exposed to technology, and it's going through sort of like a sample at this point. Over the past 6 months, we've introduced this for K to 2, and that's sort of like the next big step for us for that level.
Okay.
And I'll just add to that also when it comes to students who maybe are at the 3rd grade level who maybe need extra help or extra content that may not be covered in typical third grade level. The great thing about the system is that students can go over some of the more foundational stuff multiple times until they attain the stars that they need to proceed. Or teachers can also assign specific students specific more fundamental modules on a student by student basis, so that one student or a handful of students can focus more on the skills they need to improve to catch up with the rest of the class.
Great.
Yeah.
It's excellent. Secondly, I think there was one other thing that I really wanted to know.
But I should tell you, working with little kindergarten kids is quite an experience. I mean, exposing them to technology and mathematics, I mean, numeracy at the same time. Literacy too, it's all happening at the same time.
Yeah,
It's such a sensitive market at that point.
I think it's this year, if nothing else, has taught us that we need solutions.
Yeah.
And parents have had to come to grips with that, the use of tech.
So true, so true.
One of the major solutions, and
Yeah.
it may not be perfect, but it's
Yeah.
an option that's there and can work for us. So my students are students with special needs.
Okay.
And so the diverse student in an inclusive class
Yeah.
who might be 1 or 2 grade levels below where they should be,
Right.
still want to keep them functioning with their group, but having the ability to help them gain the skills they need to move up. That's
Yes.
why.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in line with that, for students in that grade who require that additional support, through this partnership with Cambridge Mathematics, they identified through those waypoints that I showed you, what is the level you have to take the student to ensure that they're ready for grade 3 in grade 3 itself. And those have been provided as formative learning, but those are recognized through the diagnostic and through those different summatives that they've got to do. And teachers will assign those many summatives within these modules for those specific students to provide them with that gradual upgrade, so it doesn't feel too intimidating when they get to that final summative at the end. So that has been taken into consideration, because that's a challenge that exists across the world, what you mentioned, without a doubt.
Great. Yeah, that was something that I really wanted to
Absolutely.
just wanted to see.
It was critical.
But,
it was so critical for the country. I mean, all that leads to the, if that's not taken into account, it leads to the decline of their overall objectives that they've set forth in their digital Luxembourg strategy. But France is taking it to the next level. We're building tools for K-2, and that's a sensitive audience.
It is. How you can get them to stay still long enough to.
I know. Oh boy, it's just it's so new for us too, and so we started this work in the middle of last year. We've introduced in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, but then we got so much pushback. The ministry got so much pushback from parents, but they also know, we're in a pandemic. We need these technology solutions, and what else do we do? Because homeschooling, you have to be, you have to have the skills to homeschool. It's not easy.
So the flexibility in your program is really nice. The fact that you're giving the teachers so much control of how the material is being delivered, and making the choices as to what the student sees and when they see it. I think that's really important for, especially when kids like mine, they get overwhelmed if they get into these maps and there's so much information that is so far over where they are. So as a teacher, being able to go back in and take some of this stuff that I know that is just
totally
out, so they're not completely afraid and turned off by the concepts. So that I thought that was really nice. And one of the other things I wanted to ask How many more languages are you offering or adding?
So at this point, it's 4 languages because we're looking at these countries. It's mainly France, Portugal, and Luxembourg. So it covers German, French, Portuguese, and English. But now we're getting into through Cambridge schools. We're getting into all these different countries. So we would have to expand this out to almost every a ton of different languages across. We know, and this is going to happen in partnership with a language institution that can provide us with the ability to translate it out, because we have developed a translation manager that's being used in the system, but it's past our capacity if you're looking at that many languages, because the number of languages in 160 countries is way too much to handle on our own. It's got to be automated. And Dan, you know about this when it comes to software development. I mean, it takes years and years if you want to go down that path of building it for so many languages. But the project has taken us 5 years to develop to this point. And as you can make out from the richness of the entire platform and every single element, we've had a large development team over here in Toronto, burning the midnight oil, I would say, for the past 5 years.
I think you guys are doing great. Love it. I really like it.
So I had a question. You said that you can use the site on multiple platforms, desktop, tablets of various kinds. Yeah. Can a student start, say, a test or a practice on one platform and then move to another in the middle of it and pick up where they left off on the other platform?
Absolutely. It's saving constantly as they're progressing through it. Like, for example, when Jacob was going through that diagnostic, he logged out and logged in as a teacher. The teacher could see that portion. Similarly, when students are working through it, it is constantly saving as they're working through it. So they would log out and log into another platform and continue from wherever they've left off. And that was critical, because in schools, the iPads and laptops are distributed, but at home, they may continue their work on maybe a Chromebook or a family machine or their dad's iPad, who knows? I mean, these are little children, so they would have to continue off. So that was definitely a key consideration in the development.
Let's see, do you have a dashboard for principals and other administrators to see how a building or district as a whole is
so for administrators, what we've done is in Luxembourg, they use Microsoft's Azure network, and we have integrated our Power BI from Microsoft. And this feeds the data from MathemaTIC, our platform, mirrors into the database for Power BI, and they get access to it through Power BI. So we have developed these dashboards real time for them to view on Power BI for all administrators. We're talking about mainly school principals. They get to see only aggregated information, and because of the GDPR requirements in Europe, and also for policymakers at the ministry, they get to see aggregated and anonymous information. So it's passed on through our Power BI dashboards. So we have not had the need to build our own dashboards for administrators and policymakers.
I see. So that's Luxembourg. What about the other countries like France?
So France works slightly differently. France has got their own dashboards that they've built for administrators. So we had to integrate into their dashboard. Truly, every single country you work with, it is so different, and it's expected. But the assessment tools are exactly the same. But the way the data flows in conjunction with their student information system that they've got has got to change country to country. That's what we realized. So France has built the whole thing themselves at the ministry, and they provide that through something called a student data collection system, where all the information goes into our system and goes back into their student collection system. And that's how their administrators view all the data there. Now we're bringing this into Ontario, and Ontario's got a similar system over here in Canada. Ontario's got a similar, by the way, have you folks visited Ontario?
I've been to Toronto, and I've been to
all right.
I've been to Ontario. I'm blanking on the name of the city.
Yeah, it's a pretty big problem. What about you, Wendy?
No, I haven't.
You should make a trip up here sometime.
Yeah, I think I should.
It's not as cold as they say it is.
Toronto is beautiful. I remember.
Oh yeah, definitely very touristy. You got Niagara Falls right next door. And so we're bringing this tool this year in 2021 into Ontario at this point, working with the Ministry of Education. They've got their own student information system and their student data collection system, and they use Power BI here also. They're in a Microsoft Azure network, similar to France. So wherever it's required, we integrate it accordingly for school administrators and ministry policymakers.
I see.
But in compliance with the local law of that country, of the specific country we work with.
And you mentioned the student information systems, so that you must integrate with them to pull out the student roster.
Absolutely, yes. It's a full integration end to end. So that way it's a single sign-on. Wherever required, they've got their IAM accounts, say in Luxembourg, or here in Ontario, it's through, once again, exactly the same, the Microsoft Azure network, IAM and SAML, that's what it is, but integrated into their student information system. So it's a back and forth student management of data.
I see. Let's see.
Do you have any schools in the US?
Not yet. I mean, we've been quite heavily focused on Canada and these countries in Europe, and they've been keeping us really busy. We're a little over 11 years now, but we've been thinking about the US quite a bit. I mean, US is just literally our neighbor, but it so happened we started working in Europe through conferences. We connected with ministries who were looking for something like this, and so the project kickstarted.
I was just looking over a list of student information systems in the US, and that's quite a long list there.
I mean, I'm sure every state's got their own, own procurement policies, so they'll have their own student information system. And we know every single jurisdiction we touch, since we don't work directly with consumers, we work with ministries, we would have to comply with their integration requirements and the way they provide data to their administrators.
Oh my
their
God.
principals.
Moving to the US, you'd have to do that for every school district in every state, because no one follows the same of anything. It's insane.
It's quite decentralized, I know.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, it's always it has been a little intimidating. We're in Canada. We're a little country. We may look big like a big country, but we're a tiny little country. Just about 35 million people here. And but there will be that time when we'll be looking to partner with school districts or state ministries at some point.
How do students start off? I saw this 11-digit code go by, and I was wondering, is that something that students have to type in at some point, or what is that like?
Yeah. So as a student, that same login there, so that and anyone can go to mathematic.org and click the connection button. As a teacher, when I'm logging in as a teacher, I just put my username and password. But as a student, when I first go in,
so that's to get into a class,
Yeah.
a specific class that a teacher has created. So a teacher could have 3 or 4 classes. So that's the code that's generated for a class. Now, students have got 2 options. They can either log in from the website, but in most cases, they've got their own virtual learning environment in that school, which could be like in this part of the world, we've got Blackboard and Desire to Learn and other tools over here. Schools would have that. So their login will be directly from that platform into this platform. And so even if they get into the platform, they have to get into a class. They have to register into a class. It's to get into that class, that's why they need that code. So that code is something that the teacher would provide to students saying, okay, I want you all to get into this particular class that's been created for you.
Okay, so they need the 11-digit code to choose the class.
Exactly, for the student to get into that specific class.
But the learning environment can have that embedded in it. And
Absolutely,
so
absolutely, yes, yeah. Yeah, now a student should be able to go into the website also, or through the application that's available on the App Store because they could use their iPad at home, and that would not have. It's probably not logged into their student information system or their VLE, so that's when they would use the website and log in.
Okay. Let's see. Trying to make sure that cover as much of the different criteria, assessment criteria as possible. Let's see. In terms of alignment to standards, you are handling the alignments within the different countries as well as alignments global.
That's right. Because we work with ministries, that is a requirement. It starts with that.
Right.
The standards that are set by the different ministries.
Let's see. You mentioned that the practices, when you practice, you have real world examples. I'm trying to remember if I saw them in the diagnostic test.
Yeah, so in the diagnostic, so the diagnostic is sort of like a combination of different things. It's a mix of a wide variety of questions. It could be real world, it could be just pure pure computational based on what they're learning. But then when they get into the maps, they're working through the learning assessments. Those are completely real world examples. Now, when they get into practice, they're working through, once again, computational work. And then they get into application where it's all about applying what you've learned. When you get into application, these are literally like mini cases that they're working on.
Okay, so the assessments all use real world examples?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Let's see. And it looks like the whole approach is pretty similar across the different grades.
That's right. Yeah, it was built in mind to provide that entire experience through primary and secondary.
Yes. Okay. I guess maybe this is something I'll have to see on my own in terms of depth of knowledge. You do approach the same underlying skill from different directions, so that helps to make sure that they understand it. I didn't see anything that was necessarily higher order thinking in the examples you showed.
So when you look at higher order thinking, so when you get into every challenge example in every module map, that's where the critical thinking takes place. So when you're looking at a module map and you click on, say, the black items, that's where you're going to see the higher order thinking assessments throughout the whole thing. So in a situation like this over here. So if you're looking at, say, for example, in this case, it's a room remodeling example. So every black exercise that you see here, or this guard dog example, now that's when ultimately everything comes together. So in a situation like this, where students have got to sort of like look at these 4 rooms and identify how to reconstruct these rooms so that all of them have the same size. Now, there are multiple ways in which they got to do it, but they've got to, like, this is where they have to use their analytical and critical thinking skills to solve a problem like this. Now, they can use tools and work their way through this.
Yes, okay. And so this is what's behind the black dots, is this level of test. Okay. So some examples of feedback, but perhaps I'll use the sample login you're going to provide to investigate the kinds of feedback that you get. I mean,
Definitely, yes.
I mean, it is a critical thing as to what the system does when you give wrong answers. That's really, I mean, it's very easy to design a system that will handle correct answers. And so, this is interesting.
Now, when you're looking, we've got a document that we created over here. Ooh, it's not linked. We have a document that we can share with you that's got all the different feedback types that have been built in throughout the entire assessment, and focuses just on that. And we can share that with you too. And you'll find that as you kind of work your way through as you're working your way through the system, you'll see those different ones. Jacob, would it be okay for you to share these 3 documents, the tools, answers, and feedback?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about, right, Jacob?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. And that's it for me.
And at any point, if you want to provide this to your students, let me know.
I'm actually not a
your
classroom
children.
teacher. I have to defer to Wendy on what happens inside the classroom. This is just an area I've studied for a long time. So
I mean, even if you'd like it to be a research thing, no problem at all. And
Well,
so,
if you want to do that, I may have a connection for you in Jersey City, which is the 2nd largest city in the state of New Jersey.
okay.
And there are a ton of kids there, and from 3 to 10. And there are tons of different languages in this very culturally mixed town.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'd love that. We'd love that. Certainly, Wendy.
I may have a connection for you there. My school is a specialized school for students with disabilities.
Okay.
I think where some of the program would be excellent for us, there's so much more involved than some of our kids could really handle. So I'd love to try it on a very small basis.
For sure.
Personally, because I think it's exciting. But if you're looking to really get your toe wet in the US pool, Jersey City is, woo, you can get a lot for your buck in Jersey City. So I can get a connection for you there and pass it along.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I mean, Wendy, I'll send you a quick note so that way you can share my email address, or you can provide me with a contact at some point, and that would just be great for us to.
I can definitely do that for you. I have a few connections for you in the state.
That's great. That's great.
I didn't realize you were in Jersey City. I grew up in Passaic.
Oh yeah, I'm actually in Bayonne and I work in Jersey City.
I see.
All about New Jersey.
All right. Good stuff. That's great.
Thank you guys so much. It was a very, very interesting presentation. And I think I can't wait for you to add some more languages in there. I have a few with the ESL population in my classroom alone.
That's right. Thank you so much, both of you, for making the time. And,
thank you for the extra time. Appreciate the extra time.
Yeah.
Pleasure's all ours. And we'll be in touch. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Good day. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.